Hey friends, glad you're joining us for this study in Proverbs. And today we're in chapter 25. And like we've been doing in some of these recent Proverbs, we're going to isolate a few verses rather than going verse by verse. But I do want to strongly encourage you to read the entire chapter. Meditate on it and then implement it into your life. It's full of God's good wisdom, and you will be blessed. Okay? You ready to go? Let's look at verse 12. It says, like an earring of gold or an ornament of fine gold is the rebuke of a wise judge to a listening ear. Have you noticed in the study of Proverbs that so much of it has to do with our speech, how we talk to each other, what we say to one another? Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. In other words, who we really are, what we really think is deep in our heart, and it comes out in the words that we say and how we communicate with other people. In verse 12, we're told we need to be reliable witnesses, but it's more than that. I think he's also saying we need to be willing to have forthright, even confrontation with one another. Because he says, a good rebuke, a rebuke done in grace, is like an ornament of fine gold. Look at that. When you have to say tough things to another person, if it's done the right way, it's like an ornament of fine gold. It is a work of art, a thing of beauty. So Jesus models this so well for us. Let me give you 3 quick examples, okay? You remember when he met the woman at the well in John chapter 4? Jesus had to say some hard things in that conversation with her. Had to talk about her past and even her current living situation. I mean, really tough things, but he did it so gracefully. But he did it. He was honest with her, forthright with her. You remember in Luke chapter 19 when Jesus is talking with Zacchaeus, and basically he says to Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector, you're going to have to stop extorting money from people. You're going to have to change your life. Jesus had to say some really hard things to Zacchaeus, but he did it in such a redemptive way. It was a thing of beauty, his conversation with Zacchaeus. Do you remember in John chapter 8 when Jesus had that woman caught in adultery brought to him? And after a while, it's just Jesus and the woman talking, and he says to her, neither do I condemn you, but go now and leave your life of sin. In that one line, Jesus speaks so gracefully to her, I'm not here to condemn you. But then he's also incredibly forthright with her when he tells her, but look, here's a hard truth. You've got to go and leave your life of sin. So we need to be kind. We need to be gentle. We need to be careful in how we communicate with one another. But we also need to be transparent. We need to be forthright. We need to be direct when the situation calls for it. We need that balance. That's what this proverb is teaching us. Look at verses 21 and 22. You're going to recognize these words. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will repay you. Do you struggle at all with anger? Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. If you want to put the final defeat to anger, you got to go beyond simply not paying back evil for evil, not retaliating. You've got to, like Jesus said, love your enemies. You've got to be proactive. You've got to do good to people who have done harm to you. And let me tell you, loving your enemies is no easy thing to do. At least it's not for me. And so Paul picks up in Romans chapter 12 on this proverb. He works with it in verses 14, 17, and 21. And he says, it's not enough to simply not curse your enemies. He says you need to bless them. He goes on, he says it's not enough to simply not repay evil for evil, but he says you need to repay evil with good. You need to do good to people that you would consider to be your enemies. And then there's this curious idea. Have you ever wondered about this? The proverb says when you do that, when you do good to your enemies, you pour burning coals on their head. Now, what does that mean? Well, let me tell you what I think. I think our enemies are looking for justification for how they feel about us or how they treat us. And so when we respond to their anger and their mistreatment with goodness, then that totally throws them off. It's like pouring burning coals on their head. They don't know what to do with it when we respond to them with goodness. Now, let me say this. This can't be something that we fake. When Jesus talks about loving our enemies, when this proverb talks about doing good, it doesn't come from a manipulative heart. It needs to come from a desire to do good. And again, I don't know about you, but this is not easy for me. And so I have found myself needing to ask God to give me the strength to love my enemies, to do good to those that have done harm to me. But that is the wisdom of God. All right, let's look at one more. Look at verse 23. Like a north wind that brings unexpected rain is a sly tongue which provokes a horrified look. We're back to our speech. We're back to words. And I love this proverb. It talks about a sly tongue. And I think it has in mind gossip and slander. They can be subtle. They can be elusive. Gossip comes in many disguises. Are you astute enough to understand that? For instance, it can be a heads up. There's just something I need for you to know about another person, and we can put it in that disguise. Or it can masquerade as an expression of compassion. For instance, hey, did you hear about poor so-and-so? This happened to them. This is going on in their life. Or it can even disguise itself as a prayer request. Hey, I want us all to pray for so-and-so because they've got this going on in their life. And really, all of those things are just outlets for us to gossip. That's really the truth. So, let me ask you this. How can you and I assess whether or not what we're wanting to say about someone is gossip or not? I've got 3 questions that we can ask ourselves that I think will help us kind of cut through and get to the truth about whether or not we're wanting to gossip. Question number 1, is this something I should be talking to the person about directly? Instead of having a conversation or sharing information about someone with someone else, should I be talking to that person directly? Answer that question. And that'll tell you whether or not you're gossiping. Question number 2, is this information something the person wouldn't mind my sharing? And we got to be honest about it. Seriously, what we share with other people about someone, would that person be comfortable knowing that you're sharing it with these other people? Be honest about it. And the answer to that question will tell you whether or not you're gossiping. And then the third, is this the kind of thing I would want someone sharing about me? And I'll tell you, that kind of really cuts to the chase. What we're sharing about someone else, would we want someone sharing those kinds of things about us with someone else? And again, be honest about it. And the answer to that question will tell you whether or not you're gossiping. Gossip is a serious deal. It has to do with our words. Powerful things can happen. Powerful negative things can happen because of gossip. So, how do you deal with gossip? You want to know the truth? You just stop it. Now, you may need to ask God to give you the strength, but you just stop it. All right, so there's some wisdom from God out of Proverbs chapter 25. Hey, I hope your day goes well. Please know that I'm praying for you. And remember, we will tackle another chapter tomorrow from the wonderful book of God's wisdom called Proverbs. Have a great day.